I entered the deceased student's room to collect his belongings. Everything looked normal until I opened the laptop. On the screen was an unfinished document. If you're reading this, you've become part of the cycle too. Don't press save. My name is Daniel Rhodes, and I'm an administrator at Missouri College of Arts. My job includes the unpleasant task of processing rooms after student deaths. It's not something they prepare you for in college admin courses, but someone has to do it. Usually, it's straightforward: box up personal items, document everything for the family, and prepare the room for the next occupant. Until Thomas Bailey. Dormitory number 7 had always been the quietest on campus, tucked away behind a grove of elm trees that muffled the sounds from the main quad. Block 312 was at the end of a long hallway with flickering fluorescent lights that maintenance kept promising to fix. When I inserted my master key into Thomas Bailey's door, the lock turned with unusual resistance, as if something inside didn't want to be disturbed. Thomas had been one of those students who left barely a ripple in the social pond of college life. Professors described him as gifted but reticent. His classmates knew him only by the back of his head, always hunched over a notebook in the corner of lecture halls. No campus club affiliations, no sports teams, just a solitary figure occasionally spotted in the library's most secluded corners. They found him on a Tuesday morning. His roommate had moved out at semester break, leaving Thomas alone in the double. According to security footage, no one had entered or exited his room for 26 hours before the wellness check. He simply hadn't come out. No signs of violence, no evidence of drugs or alcohol, no suicide note. The medical examiner's report was clinically detached: death from cardiac arrest during sleep. He was 21 years old. I arrived at his room 3 days later. The air inside held a strange stillness, that peculiar emptiness that settles when a place knows its occupant won't return. Everything was meticulously organized: philosophy books arranged by author, bed made with hospital corners, desk cleared except for a laptop placed precisely in the center. The room looked as though he'd stepped out for a lecture and would return any minute to continue whatever he'd been working on. I began the process, labeling boxes for his modest possessions, when I noticed the laptop screen was dimly lit. Odd, I thought. After 3 days, it should have either died or gone into hibernation. The screen showed a document without a title, cursor blinking patiently at the end of the last line as if waiting for someone to continue the thought. I hesitated before touching it. This wasn't part of my job, reading a deceased student's private writings, but something about that pulsing cursor pulled me forward. I told myself I was checking for contact information, anything that might help with the disposition of his belongings. I clicked the document. A word processor opened fully, revealing the text. And that's when I felt the first cold finger trace down my spine. If you're reading this, you're already inside. This is a cycle. It always begins with someone else's death. I stared at the words, puzzled. My first thought was that it was some creative writing assignment. Thomas had been taking a contemporary literature course. But as I scrolled down, the document continued like a personal diary. I found this file after the student before me died. He sat in this same room. His name was Ian. The file had his name and my date. And now, here you are. Don't save this. Just read. I closed the laptop, a strange discomfort settling in my chest. Coincidence, I assured myself. Some morbid fiction project. But that night, in my office, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I pulled up the dormitory records going back several years. And there it was, 5 years earlier, a student named Ian Lake had died in that exact room. Same circumstances. Heart failure. During sleep. Same bed. Same date, just a different year. The next day, I returned to Thomas's room. No one had been inside since my visit, the security log confirmed it. Yet when I opened the laptop again, the document had changed. Without an internet connection. Without any open processes or automatic updates running. At the bottom of the text was a new paragraph. You want to know who's next? Check the box with the class notes. He's already left his name there. But you won't find him in reality. Only here. The skin on my arms prickled as I turned around. On the shelf was a cardboard box containing class notebooks and loose papers. My hands trembled slightly as I rifled through them, telling myself I was being ridiculous, that this was some elaborate prank the tech students had set up. In one of the notebooks, on the last page, written in black ink, Daniel Rhodes. March 12th. At night. My own name. Tomorrow's date. I dropped the box and nearly ran from the room, the doors slamming behind me with a finality that echoed down the empty hallway. Students passing by gave me curious glances as I leaned against the wall, trying to steady my breathing. Professor Winters from the psychology department stopped to ask if I was all right. Fine, I managed. Just, the dust in that room. She nodded sympathetically. Thomas's room? Such a tragedy. He was in my cognitive psychology seminar. Brilliant mind, always asking questions about perception and reality. Did you know he was doing independent research on sleep patterns and collective consciousness? He told me once he hadn't had a proper night's sleep in months. I nodded absently, barely registering her words. My mind was still fixed on those 13 characters in black ink. My name. Tomorrow's date. By evening, rationality had somewhat returned. I convinced myself it was some sort of sick joke. Thomas must have known me, all students knew the administration staff by name. He could have written that before his death, not knowing when I would find it. The coincidence with Ian was just that, a coincidence. But I couldn't stay away. After dinner, I drove back to campus. The dormitory was quiet, most students out for Tuesday night activities. Block 312 was exactly as I had left it, except for one detail: the laptop was now closed. I opened it. The screen came to life immediately, no password required. The document was now titled Untitled_3, the same file name mentioned in Ian Lake's belongings inventory from 5 years ago. My hands shook as I disconnected the laptop's battery and carried it to my car. At home, surrounded by the comfortable familiarity of my living room, I felt more in control. I connected the laptop to power and opened it again. The document was gone. Not just closed, completely erased. I checked the recycle bin, the recent files, ran a search for any text files. Nothing. I began recording everything on my phone's voice memo app, speaking clearly about the strange document, the coincidence of Ian and Thomas, the written prediction with my name. I played it back to make sure it had recorded properly. The voice that came from my phone wasn't mine. It was similar, the same pitch perhaps, but colder. More precise. And it was saying, "Don't try to escape the cycle. You're not the first to try. But you're the first to read to the end." I deleted the recording, my finger jabbing frantically at the screen. Then I shut down Thomas's laptop, removed the hard drive, and locked it in my desk drawer. For good measure, I disconnected my home internet and turned off my own computer. That night, I called my old college roommate, Frank Jenkins, who now worked in computer security. I tried to explain what was happening without sounding completely unhinged. "Look, is it possible for a text file to update itself without network access? Or for someone to remotely access a computer that's not connected to anything?" Frank's laugh was reassuring in its skepticism. "Not unless someone's got physical access to the machine. Text files don't just write themselves, Dan. Someone's messing with you." "What about voice recordings changing?" "More likely you're just hearing what you expect to hear. Our brains do that sometimes, interpret patterns in ways that match our expectations. Remember that psychology course we took junior year?" After we hung up, I felt slightly better. Frank's logical explanations had provided some grounding. I poured myself a whiskey and tried to focus on a baseball game, anything to distract my mind from tomorrow's date. I must have dozed off on the couch because I woke with a start at 2 a.m. The TV was still on, bathing the room in a blue glow. And on my coffee table was my laptop, open, screen bright, with a new text document displaying those now familiar words: "If you're reading this, you're already inside." I hadn't opened my laptop. I'd shut it down and put it away before calling Frank. I slammed it closed and took it to the kitchen. I was about to submerge it in water when rationality stopped me. Evidence, I thought. I need to preserve this as evidence. For whom, I wasn't sure. Morning came after a sleepless night. March 12th. I called in sick to work, something I hadn't done in 3 years with the college. I couldn't face being on campus today. Instead, I drove to the public library 2 towns over, where nobody knew me. I spent hours researching cardiac arrests in young adults, looking for patterns, explanations, anything that might connect Ian and Thomas beyond the room they'd occupied. The library computers felt safe somehow, public, impersonal. But when I opened a browser and navigated to my email, there it was, waiting in my inbox. A message with no sender, titled untitled_3. I didn't open it. Instead, I logged out, deleted my browsing history, and left. At a diner across the street, I ordered coffee and tried to think clearly. What connected Ian Lake and Thomas Bailey? Different majors, different years, different social circles. The only common thread was room 312 in dormitory number 7. And now, somehow, me. The mail arrived as I was returning home that afternoon. Bills, advertisements, and a plain white envelope with no return address. Inside was a photograph. The image showed me sleeping in my bed, taken from a high angle, as if someone had been standing over me. The timestamp in the corner read 3:17 a.m. Last night. On the back, written in the same black ink, Ian, Thomas, Daniel. I packed a bag and drove to a motel 30 miles away. I paid cash and used a false name. In the anonymous safety of room 114, I finally allowed myself to think the unthinkable. What if some deaths aren't accidents but signals for the next person who opens the wrong file at the right time? The digital clock on the nightstand read 11:43 p.m. In 17 minutes, it would be March 13th, and I would have outlived the prediction. I sat on the edge of the bed, watching the minutes tick by with agonizing slowness. 11:44 p.m. My phone rang, Frank calling to check on me. I let it go to voicemail. 11:52 p.m. A text message from an unknown number: the cycle doesn't end when you change locations. 11:57 p.m. The laptop I'd left at home somehow on the desk in the motel room, open, that cursed document glowing on the screen. New text had appeared. Time isn't linear in the cycle. Ian saw Thomas. Thomas saw you. You'll see the next. The pattern continues until someone breaks it. Will you? 11:59 p.m. The digital clock flickered and reset to 11:17 p.m. Outside my window, I could see other clocks in the motel office resetting as well. Somehow, time was giving me another chance, or extending my torment. As midnight approached for the second time, I made a decision. I opened the document and began typing, adding to whatever force or entity had been communicating with me. I see the pattern now. It's not about death, it's about witnessing. Each of us becomes both observer and observed. I won't be running anymore. What do you want me to understand? The cursor blinked for several seconds. Then words began to appear, typing themselves across the screen. Understanding is the first step to breaking the cycle. Look deeper into Ian's research. He found something in the spaces between consciousness. Thomas continued it. Now it's your turn to either perpetuate or end what they started. The choice that seems most obvious is rarely the right one. The clock struck midnight. March 13th. I had survived the prediction, but something told me this was just the beginning. Tomorrow, I would go back to campus, back to room 312. I would find Ian's research, understand what Thomas had continued, and decide whether to be the one who finally breaks the chain, or the one who forges the next link. What if certain deaths aren't random but signals for those who open the wrong file at the right time? And what if understanding the pattern is the only way to change it?